barrel roll.
Welcome to the Now. I'm Ashley.
I'm Mica.
The battle over microtransactions in Star Wars Battlefront 2 may be over for now, with EA announcing last week that they're postponing them until they can get their shit sorted out. But judging by the fallout over the weekend, well, the war is far from over.
Since last week's major announcement about how they're changing the Battlefront 2 loot boxes, EA has had to deal with a host of other problems. Falling stock prices, concerned investors, changes to other EA games.
That's a lot.
And now reports that the game might be selling significantly less at launch than the first game did back in 2015, so
overall, not a great weekend for EA.
No.
So we don't need to go through the entire saga of Battlefront 2's microtransactions all over again. You're probably reasonably aware that people have been kind of upset about the titles, loot boxes, and progression system. It was just about the only thing anyone was talking about in the video game world last week. We have like 5 videos about it if you want to check them out.
All that led to crazy Reddit drama, lots of downvotes, world record on downvotes being broken.
And very impressive. Well
Yep,
done.
well done. Disney contacting EA CEO and EA having to walk back not only the microtransaction prices earlier last week, but even the microtransactions themselves. They're now gone entirely from Battlefront 2, you know, until they're back later.
Sometime. But that doesn't look to be the end of it for EA because so far the consequences have been pretty far-reaching to the point where it's starting to affect EA's business. And when you start affecting their business, that's when people pay attention. Following the entire blow-up, it looks like EA's investors might have been a little spooked by the internet rage machine because the company's stock prices have been dropping steadily since the middle of last week.
Yikes.
Yep.
As of this morning, share prices have dropped about 2.5% in a few days, and unsurprisingly, the drop coincides almost perfectly with, those delicious Reddit posts. Although it should be noted that the company's stock is up 42% on the year, so it's not like it's all bad for EA.
Yeah, honestly, they're probably fine taking a 2.5% if they get 40% up. But it does show that the loot box shouting did make it all the way to Wall Street. In fact, some analysts started urging people away from EA stock, which is usually opposite of what happens when a massive new game is about to launch, since that's when developers and publishers tend to make just about all their revenue.
Justin Post, managing director at investment firm Merrill Lynch, cautioned buyers, the escalation of EA's concessions over the past month are a potential negative indicator of pre-order sales trends and overall unit confidence. Star Wars Battlefront 2's bumpy launch week creates incremental risk to early unit sales, initial reviews also underwhelming. We think unit sales could come in below EA's earlier FY18 outlook for around 14 million units.
So that's never good.
No.
For EA's part, they had to go on the defensive about all these investor concerns and spoke directly to them. Over the weekend, EA issued an SEC filing to assure everyone that everything is going to be just fine, microtransactions or not.
In the filing, the publisher wrote, on November 16, 2017, Electronic Arts Inc., EA, announced in a blog post on its website, www.ea.com/news, that it will turn off all in-game purchases for the Star Wars Battlefront 2 title until further notice. This change is not expected to have a material impact on EA's fiscal year 2018 financial guidance.
Sure, you weren't expecting it to make that much money. Honest.
It seems like all of this backlash isn't just affecting Star Wars Battlefront 2 either, because EA is also walking back the microtransactions and progression in another recently released title, Need for Speed Payback. The timing of that is totally not a coincidence. It's just they've been planning this the entire time. Nothing to see here, folks.
Following loads of criticism that Need for Speed's progression system is similarly grindy, frustrating, and obtuse, and just kind of mean, developer Ghost Games has announced a ton of changes resulting in better rewards and a lot less grinding. The developer said, our aim with these changes is to make the progression, especially around the ownership of cars, a much more enjoyable experience. Which, you know, if you're talking about a game, that's what you want to do, right? Enjoy it.
What? Strange concept.
Theoretically.
Of course, none of this microtransaction business, with gamers celebrating a huge win over a monolithic publisher, matters, at all if Battlefront 2 turns out to be a massive sales hit. But now, well, we've got our first data from the game's launch, and it's not looking super great for EA at retail anyway, so.
Despite assurances last month from UK retailers that Star Wars Battlefront 2 is gonna sell way more than its predecessor, it seems like those claims may be in doubt unless, well, basically everyone has gone digital in the past 2 years. According to information released by GamesIndustry.biz, sales at the retail end of Star Wars Battlefront 2 are down 50% from Battlefield 1 and down 60% from Battlefront 1 in 2015.
But it gets even a little bit worse than that, in fact. Battlefront 2 sales didn't even do enough to earn the week's #1 spot at retail. It lost to Call of Duty World War II, which is on its 3rd straight week at #1. So, ouch.
Ouch. Yeah, that's accurate. Now, caveat time. This is only tracking the game's retail sales. It is possible the digital numbers make up for the poor display at retail. Probably not quite that much, but that was sort of the case with Destiny 2 back in September, which did huge digitally compared to retail, although it still didn't surpass the sales of Destiny 1 with all those factors combined. It's also possible that Battlefront 2 is doing just fine in other territories compared to the UK. These are just the first numbers that we're seeing. After all, GFK is always the first to report in after the weekend, and it's usually the first indicator, but it does kind of act as like the canary in the coal mine, as an indicator for how all the different regions are receiving the game.
And however, these things tend to kind of play out across most other countries and regions, except for Japan, because they just do whatever they want over there.
You know what, Japan? You do you.
As for the gap in digital sales and retail sales, EA's own metrics claim that around 36% of their sales are digital, so it's not very likely that there's just way more people buying Battlefront 2 on Xbox Live and PSN, but you know what? It's possible, so there's that.
So, does that mean that with all those factors, we're actually looking at a scenario where online rage had a business impact on a company as huge as EA? If so, that's very, very impressive. It's possible. The story of Battlefront 2's bogus microtransactions and progression did gain a lot of legs last week, and a lot of people were passing it around. A lot of people were saying they're not going to buy it. It made it outside the normal gaming sphere, to the point where it got coverage on mainstream media outlets like CNN and BBC. I mean, to the point that it rankled top feathers among Disney's top brass.
Wall Street Journal reports that Disney head of consumer products and interactive media, Jimmy Pitaro, contacted EA CEO Andrew Wilson shortly before the publisher decided to temporarily order 6060 games microtransactions. Originally, it was reported that Disney CEO Bob Iger was the one to call Wilson, but it looks like that wasn't actually the case. The original report came from VentureBeat, who has edited their story and apologized for the error.
Yeah, well, usually what we see in these kinds of stories is like the stuff we see on Reddit doesn't always translate to a real-world impact. A lot of people will be upset, but there are a lot of times where people will end up buying a game anyway because they don't want to miss out on it. But this seems to affect the trend. It'll be very curious to see how this ends up affecting the developers, whether or not gamers actually like stuck to their guns with the calls for boycott of Battlefront 2. That's huge. It's a lot for someone to say, I'm going to not have this gaming experience because I'm gonna take a stand.
And if it does actually cost a publisher out there some major AAA money, we could watch some changes to how loot boxes and microtransactions are handled in the future. It doesn't mean that they'll go away necessarily.
They won't.
No, after all, even Battlefront 2s are coming back eventually, but who knows, maybe some gamers will see some positive movement on that front.
Like maybe they will just make them all cosmetic, which is what people were asking for in the first place. I think, you know, if EA is saying that we'll do these microtransactions and that way all of the future content can be free, people are all about that. They'll say, okay, that's fine. But as long as they don't affect the gameplay themselves. Anyway, what do you guys think of the ongoing business consequences EA is facing over the Battlefront 2 loot boxes? Let us know in the comments.
For future updates on the fall's biggest releases and flops, remember to like this video, and if you are new around here, subscribe to the now. It's also underwhelming. We think unit sales could come below EA's earlier FY18 outlook for around 14 million?
Yeah.
We think
Right, so what we're actually looking at a scenario where online rage actually maybe had a business impact on EA as a company. Damn, I'm sorry.